first question that most everybody wants to know. We're gonna go right into that.
Okay.
Yeah. What was the progression from the NOI, then to Wallace Muhammad, then to where you guys are today? Because most people believe that from some of the statements that, or some of the things that were said by Wallace Muhammad, obviously, right?
Right.
Contradict the standard sometimes of the Islamic Aqidah from the Kitab and the Sunnah. So what was the progression from that? And being as though you were followers of Wallace Muhammad, how did you get past those statements and rectify them to where you're going today?
Okay,
If that's clear.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And again, we can go historically, we can look at the passing of Elijah Muhammad. When Elijah Muhammad passed, for the overwhelming majority of his followers, that was the end of that era or that period. Because Imam Warith Deen Mohammed, the very next day, he began to reorient and redirect our focus and to take us out of the teachings that came with the Nation of Islam and to bring us towards the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, because he was dealing with a situation that at that time was 40 years in the making. So that meant that it's almost like an ocean liner. You can't just turn it around on a dime. So he began to redirect it. And he also had to deal with a people who had very, very different, we'll just say, levels of understanding and development. And you know, in mathematics, you have to deal with the lowest common denominator. And so sometimes he said things that were reduced to elementary stuff that it's almost like baby language. And even he himself saw that that was holding him back from what he felt was his real mission, because eventually he resigned as the leader. And that resignation was a sign for us that we were on our own. And in Philadelphia, we took it serious. And so we used him as a preferred authority when it comes to certain social perspectives. Like, you know, he told us that we should see ourselves as being Americans. It doesn't mean that we come under American authority, but we live here, and so we have to make a living here. So when it comes to social constructs, he is a preferred authority in some areas. But when it comes to the Quran and the Sunnah, there's only one authority, and that's Allah's messenger. And I believe in Philadelphia that we were more successful in being able to break away from that. And so consequently, we may be a little more progressive than others. So our evolution, and I can speak for myself. I came into the community in '71. I went to a fruit class, a FOI class in New York. Warith Deen Mohammed was the guest speaker under Minister Farrakhan. He recited the Quran. And the Quran, he recited Surah Fatiha. I was so amazed by it that I went and got a book called Teachers of the Quran. And in the Nation of Islam, between 1972 and 1975, I had learned the last juz of the Quran. And I used Sheikh Hussein and Abdul Bassett, you know, because they were just coming out with the cassettes and the videos. Not the video, but cassettes. The cassettes, and so I was able to get, because I had an ear for the language. Okay. I had an ear for language. And so some of us, even under Elijah Muhammad, because Warith Deen Mohammed, his brother Akbar Muhammad, who went to El-Azhar as part of the Nation of Islam. So some of us began to learn the religion. And when Elijah Muhammad passed away, we were in position to begin to teach from the Quran and the Sunnah. So that transition began in '75 with the passing of Elijah Muhammad. The Imam really freed us here in Philadelphia when he said he was no longer the leader of the community, because he saw that his work was more as a social activist, similar to how Malcolm saw himself. And he didn't want to be bogged down, because he even made a statement that is real. He said he believed that 70% of his imams had failed to learn the religion the way they should have. And so consequently, the membership was not able to grow. In Philadelphia, it was a little different. Now, things have changed since he made this statement in the late 90s, he died in 2008. So he's been dead almost 10 years. So the statement that he made, he really felt that not he himself, but a lot of his imams. And so sometimes we look at the membership of his community that came out of the Nation of Islam, and we can see a people who may have good intentions. They may be sincere, but they just need to make a connection. And this is why this next generation is so important, that we can make the connection, and hopefully we don't have any animosity or any, we'd say apprehension with one connecting with the other. So here in the Philadelphia Masjid, we have been pretty successful in continuing to evolve or continuing to grow. And we don't see we don't feel any reluctance to having anyone come among us and be a khatib, do classes. We've had our brother Imam Shadid here with us for about three and a half years, and he's done a lot to help to dispel some of the notions that people have had about the other Muslim, the other type of Muslim. Because, you know, sometimes people will say, well, they don't speak our language. And that means that, you know, and that's more the social language. The language for the Muslim is the Arabic of the Quran and the Sunnah. So I don't know how someone can say they don't speak their language. But then you have social construct like do for self, remake the world. See, these are things that were part of the cliches of the community. And if people don't hear that, then, you know, they feel, okay, he's not speaking my language. And there are others who, you know, if we don't cite certain authorities or certain chains of hadith, then they only take from certain chains. And so, you know, people only took from a certain chain, and we have to link the chains together.
Okay, mashallah. My question to you, in terms of the creedal issues that many might ask to deal with the Philadelphia Masjid, those who transition from the Warith Deen community, they have this, I want to say they have a conception that they believe that you guys do not believe in the authentic creed, as what they consider to be authentic creed. Y'all don't hold those beliefs. I would hopefully like for you to shed light on that. Is there any difference in terms of creed, or is the same belief system that Warith Deen has, is it still predominant, or is there any difference in there?
Okay, Imam Warith Deen didn't have a creed system. He wasn't a faqih. He didn't deal with aqidah. He wasn't a mufassir, muhaddith. He was none of those, he took none of those positions where we get the classical Islamic knowledge. Now, it was up to the individuals. Now, I taught here for 15 years. We had Imam Mufassal. All the children had to learn Imam Mufassal. Amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rasulihi wa yawm al-akhirah ila al-akhirah. So, you know, we had that and it depended on each individual area. The strength of that leadership is reflected on what the people begin to learn and understand. So we didn't have a nationwide system where the imam had his aqidah or he had his way of belief. People basically were autonomous. Okay. And he decentralized the community because being centralized is a security risk to some extent. If the center go down, the whole thing can go down. So he decentralized things, and people were basically left on their own with encouragement to learn the classical knowledge in Islam, what we may call the knuckle. He said you get the akal and then you get the knuckle, meaning that, you know, we have to have a perspective, but we also have to know that there's a classical position for everything we do in Islam. And those classical sources is where we begin. And so we had to go back to the beginning. And the beginning for us was Imam Mufassal, Buni al-Islam al-Khams, you know, what the hadith of Umar, radiallahu anhu. that became a foundation for us. Now, in some areas, it was stronger than other areas, both in the city and in a masjid inside the city. And I would like to think that here at the Philadelphia Masjid, we've been pretty successful at helping the people to understand there's only one standard aqidah for the Muslim. That's Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We want to phrase it like that, but it's what the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, how he and his companions believed. It's only one way of worship. He said, pray as you see me pray. He told us how and when to fast. And he told us, about zakat and hajj. And so these are the basic standards that have always been acceptable to us. But see, sometimes we can look at the weakest link, and we can say, because this person's understanding may not be what it should be, then maybe that's how all of them are.
And that's not true.
No, that's not true.
And right now, brothers and sisters, you're hearing it directly from the Imam that this is not their position, and they do believe in the standard Western. And this is very important because this bridge a gap. There's a conception out there that we can't deal with people who laid down the groundwork. As you've seen, they established institutions here in Philadelphia, here in America and abroad, way before, inshallah ta'ala, a lot of us even knew about Salafi and certain creeds. So it's not respectable that we don't give respect to that. We have to give respect to that. So, inshallah ta'ala, jazakallah khairan for clearing that up. Brother Isa will ask you another question.
No. Another question that we want to get this myth out of here is that what they think about these communities, whether it's Masjid Allah, whether it's Philadelphia Masjid or whatever, people kind of group you all guys together, and they say that you are nationalistic. And we know that they say that because we know that nationalism or putting your tribe or another is not from Islam. They say that you're a black nationalist. They say that you only care about black people. They say that you have the same concept about race that the NOI had, that the white man is a devil and that black people are above them in some ways. This is some of the myths that exist when they talk about this community, which could clear that up for us, inshallah ta'ala.
Yeah, well, again, if we took a snapshot from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, then that might be, something that someone can to. And even some people who may speak the old language are still tied to the old way of seeing things. We may just take that as being a position that all of us have. Our position Islamically, as the Quran says in Surah 49, where Allah says that He, O mankind, surely we created you from a nation and a tribe, from a male and a female, and we made you nations and tribes so you may know each other. This is the decree of Allah, and we don't see Islam as something that someone has because of the color of their skin. But it's the taqwa, that's the thing that makes people better.
No. Alhamdulillah. What would you say, what would be one of the important reasons why we need to bridge the gap? Why do you believe that the communities, especially here in America and Philadelphia, need to bridge the gap? What would be one of those important highlighting points?
Well, because the Prophet ﷺ said anyone who doesn't respect the elders or the young is not of his ummah. So that's reason number one. And number two, we need each other. Because, see, we're not going to live forever. No. What we have done is of no value if we don't have someone that can inherit from us. And, those who inherit, we know the learned are the inheritors. And so, brothers, and I don't think this hadith is there just with happenstance. The learned are the inheritors of the prophets. I think the Prophet, he said that. So we have young brothers who have learned. They have gotten the information and knowledge. They can now begin to help to balance. Because, see, there are deficiencies on both sides. As we get older, we don't have the energy of the youth. We really don't even have the long vision or long sight of the youth. So we do need to have youth who can see beyond just the next 5 or 6. I can't imagine 20 years from now and plan for it. I mean, I have to plan for it, but I really can't, we just say realistically think I'm going to be in the same position I'm in now. in 20 years. But the youth, they should be able to see 20 years into the future. And so we need them if we're going to have a future ourselves. We need them if our efforts that we have made are going to have any lasting value. So, but at the same time, we need them because they're our family. See, many of the youth who are out there, there are maybe 2 or 3 degrees of separation at the most. We had 500 children here every year. Many of them have gone out. They have children. A lot of their children have been estranged from us because they didn't need what we needed 40 years ago, and so they think that what we had is old-fashioned. No. And so they disconnected. But they're still our children. No. They're still our blood in many cases, but they are people who are closer to us than anybody else. And so we have to, we just say, mend the rift that is in our community, because the rift is not just among the Muslims. The rift is in neighborhoods. It's in societies, and there are many, many who are in this neighborhood who are Muslim. We had a janazah here about 2 years ago, about 800 young people here. I asked them, and some of them said they had never been here before, right? I said, well, where do you live? He said, I live at 46 and Brown. He's a Muslim right around the corner, but had never been here. And this is a neighborhood that we share together. And so in order for us to be responsible in our neighborhood, we have to be together. So, you know, both can bring valuable contributions. But if we had no other reason other than the fact that we are, we can't sever the ties of relationships. We have to bring those ties back together. That's part of our religious obligation. So we have to, because I think the Amir Saifullah said when his niece got married, she had some problems. I don't know if you want to speak about it, but I think that's an illustration of just how the rift from one generation to the next can create issues and problems that become a burden for us. And so we have to try to make certain that we don't carry each other's burden. Meaning that if someone is burdened by what they think I believe, they should ask me about it so they don't have to carry it. Because if it is something that's wrong, it's my burden, and you can help me lighten it by just giving me an opportunity to get some of it off of me. And then the youth, they have a burden, and their greatest burden is how are they going to be established we just say in this environment as an individual, as a family, because it's much more difficult today for youth to establish themselves. I mean, they get married, and many marriages don't last because they don't have the resources. No. So part of what we can help them with, we can show them how to establish yourself in this type of environment, which is really just such a, we just say there's so much inequity that we have to be together to face the challenges of economics, of education, of the criminal justice system. We know a lot about these things. They come face to face with it, and they don't have any ability to respond. And so they get caught up, and they get chewed up by the economics, by the, I mean, you go into the prisons, many of the people in prison are Muslim. And some of them were Muslim when they went in, or they become Muslim when they in, and then they go back to criminality when they come out. So we have to begin to help to alleviate some of this problem.
As you were speaking, Brother Imam, I had a idea came to my mind, and I would like to invite all of you individuals who have any type of position, you know, whether it be in any type of community, especially here specifically, the Salafi communities, to come out and we have, if you don't mind, we have here as an open dialogue, a way to actually move on, talk about some real solution-based things to connect the communities, because this separation has to stop. Especially this blanket understanding, as you hear the Imam is saying, you carrying the burden, believing something about someone without even having, let's say, having the fortitude or having the, actually having the actual, manhood. I want to say, manhood to actually approach that person to find out what it is that they actually believe. And are they closed-minded? Are they open-minded? these things need to be addressed. So if anyone can go to their local imams or any of their local masajids and tell them that we're calling out for a open dialogue of, bridging the gap, actually. What you think about that?
Yeah, I think bridging the gap, if there are gaps between us, then we have to bridge it, because nothing is stagnant in creation. And the gap either will get bigger or get smaller.
Mashallah.
And if it gets any bigger than it is today, all of us are going to end up on an island by ourselves.
And that's pretty much where
we are today.
Where the ship is going at pretty much today.
I mean, and then if you're on an island by yourself, it's hard to keep your family together, because what your family needs may be somewhere else.
Exactly.
And they will leave you to go to get what they need. And so we have to bridge the gap.
Can you explain some of the social reform that you and you guys, you elders, have always in your community has always been participating in, as far as the social reform of any society, and the society that y'all been in, the role that y'all play? I think that's very vital for, especially for the youth, to understand that this role has already been, tackled and addressed.
Yeah. Well, when the dynamics were different in the 60s, we were part of a movement that was a social movement. And when I say social, I mean there was a lot of dynamism in society. You had the anti-war movement, you had the Black Power movement, the struggle. So we had people who were engaged with the idea of being part of a movement. And so this was more a social movement than a religious movement. And so socially, we had very much success in the prisons. Malcolm came out of the prisons, and many of the leadership in the community came into, we just say, contact for the first time in their lives with something that led them to Islam while they were in prison. And one of the most successful prison reform movements was the movement that was founded by the Nation of Islam. The other element that we had, when people come out of jail, what do? So we had an economic program. Every brother became a salesman or a merchant. You were selling either Muhammad Speaks. We were importing millions of pounds of fish from Peru every month. And so a brother can go into the fish business. In Philadelphia, we had the steak and takes. We had the bean pies. We had the juice factory. New York had over 100 steak and takes. Mm-hmm. And so brothers, again, if you wanted a job, you can get a job doing for self. Everybody wasn't a merchant. So many were encouraged to go back to school, and they began to involve themselves in the other types of business, or even working for somebody. But in the community, under the Nation of Islam, brothers had to work. And we used to have to carry a card that says, "I am a Muslim." If you find the possessor of this card breaking any laws, you should turn him over to the police. I mean, it was a card, I'm ad-libbing, but it was similar to that. Because, see, the stress was to be upright and to be decent, to be hardworking, to take care of your family. And because we had activities throughout the week, so brothers were always at the temples, we call them then. And it was almost like a basic training. For like the military, when they undergo basic training, you really begin to get a certain spirit of unity. You begin to have a certain discipline. You begin to have certain standards. And then you can operate with a more cohesive program or agenda. There was a very specific agenda that the Nation of Islam had. We even had an airplane. And as a matter of fact, the brother who was the pilot, his name was Sultan Muhammad. He was Elijah Muhammad's grandson. Now his son, Sultan, is now, and he graduated from the Islamic University of Medina. So he's in Chicago now, and he heads the program for Minister Farrakhan, and he's trying to do the same thing among them. So, it's that community. We shouldn't write them off, but we do know that, they still have to get over the same hurdles that we had to get over. And their preferred authority has become Allah and His Messenger. And so as long as they still have human beings who are the preferred authority, they have that hurdle. But the community itself, because we had a dynamic spirit where we were a movement, it was much easier for us to pool our resources, to do things based on the standards that we had, and to be willing to make sacrifices to do for self. And part of the sacrifice was a brother, if he was just selling Muslim or Muhammad speaks, if he was just selling fish, if he was just selling, because see, once you start selling people stuff, then the idea, okay, I can sell them something else. And you actually expand your ability to be a merchant. And so the do for self spirit was very strong.
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, it's actually a two-part question. We know we had an influx of our generation, and maybe the generation before us, because some of the brothers are a little older than me and this brother. It was like a mass migration to go to the Middle East in the 90s and in the early 2000s and things like that. A lot of us went over, we learned Orthodox Islam, which they call it Sunni Islam or Salafiyya. A lot of us came back with that Orthodox version of Islam. My first question part is that the rift that happened, what's some of the reasons that you believe that rift happened? That's the first question. After brothers came back, what happened between the elders and the younger people? The second question would be, how do we now use the academics of the youth who came back, who may not have a certain extremism with them or a certain harshness against the elders? How do we get that academics mixed with you guys' experiences and resources? That's the two-part question.
Okay, well,
Before you answer that question, I do want to mention something back what you were saying, and that was the importance of where did the value go? Brothers and sisters, where did that value go? Where did that institution go at? Because most of the things that the brother Imam just mentioned, if not all, that was a system that actually worked, and it have worked it. And I believe that, it's okay to focus on creed, Tawheed, but where is our social reform? Where is our building up each other? And this is something that we had to all think about, because a lot of times brothers always push, well, they have the correct Aqidah, have to be right, the men have to be right. But where do we have anything at? We don't have nothing to provide for our families. We don't have no economic system that's put in play. And this is something that I see that you guys were successful in actually doing, and I believe that it didn't go against any of the Quran.
okay, yes, I think I can.
No, I'm not asking him a question. I'm just answering. I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, see, the one question, we don't feel that we created a rift that came from us, but we may have become complacent. And when we became decentralized, then sometimes our focus wasn't now on trying to reach our people or stay in contact with them, but our focus was on just maintaining what we had. So we probably became more internalized in our focus than external, or just having relationship with people. And also we began to sometimes when you have come out of a situation and look at our communities in general, when people have some achievement, then they want to leave, and the ones that are left behind, it's a rift there, but the ones who left, they weren't doing it to create a rift, they were doing it to move on. And so I think we moved on, but we didn't move on with the knowledge that we needed. And so our movement wasn't something that others can see, okay, we have to follow. They said, well, no, they're going in the wrong direction, or they're not on the straight path. And I think that's what a lot of the youth saw, because we were moving into areas that were more for the enhancement of individuals. And even the reason why a lot of our economic engine was dismantled, because if you have it all concentrated, you can have one or two individuals that can just take over. And there were some who were using the economic engine for personal gain. And the Imam saw a lot of things, Imam Warith Deen Mohammed, and he dismantled them, because it was too much of an opportunity when you have centralized, and we see corruption in government, we see corruption in countries overseas where they have tremendous resources. So we know when you have a lot of resources, you can have people around who take advantage. And
Well, the hearts can definitely be ugly and be diseased. The law talks about it. The Prophet talks about it.
So that rift on that side. And so I think because our movement was disconnected, Because see, and again, if we look at the W.B. Du Bois with the Talented Tenth and things like that, how they became disconnected from Booker T. Washington, and even though it was one community, there may have been a perceived rift or what they call a generation gap. So I think it's more a generation gap because one generation moved on, and we sort of left the other generation behind, or we disconnected, or those of them who went overseas, when they came back, they saw that we weren't going in a direction that their knowledge was projecting or propelling them. And so, we didn't look back. And so to some extent, we didn't recognize how great the problem was.
And that's on both sides, or just
Well, I'm just
on...
speaking from the side of the elders. We didn't. I mean, we have personal encounters, but I didn't know the extent of all of the fatwas that may have been rendered, or some of the positions that were taken. I didn't know they were extensive until just recently. I mean, because you hear things, but see, as a Nation of Islam, we were used to hearing that anyway. I mean, because you can imagine what we heard in the 60s. Right. And there were groups who were right here in Philadelphia, they wouldn't call us Muslims, they would call us muckmucks. And so, we sort of were able to understand why as we look back. But when it was going on, it was a real serious issue. And some serious consequences sometimes happen because of that. So the rift itself is particular to us, but it's not something that is exclusively, because there's a generation gap between the old and the young, between classes. And so sometimes, because see, many of the younger brothers, their constituency, a lot of them have been in prison. And so when you have that type of constituency, it's more a class, there are class elements that are involved that now take on religious connotations, or they be justified by religion, but to some extent,
to behave the way that they behave.
Yeah, well, I'm doing this because
so their religion justify it.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I think we've seen that historically, even with the split between the Sunni and the Shia. We've seen some justification based on that became religious, but it was more political and even ethnic in its initial manifestation, because those who were the Persian of extract, they never were comfortable being under the Arabs, and so they basically went back to that after the Khulafa had gone.
Was there ever an open dialogue?
Yeah. The second part.
Yeah, the second part was how do we now
if I can,
academics and experience together.
If I can chime in on the question that was previously stated by you to reinforce what the Imam said, how do we go about solving that rift? There's always been the policy of the Imam that truth will always overtake falsities. So we didn't engage ourselves in any hostility. Our policy was to reach out to the brothers that came from abroad. There's been numerous brothers that we have reached out to, from Sheikh Ali Davis, the Shadi, the Beige, Sheikh Jumani. In fact, this community goes all the way back to the late Dr. Ishmael Faruqi. May Allah have mercy upon him and his wife in Grantham Paradise. And he was actually the professor of Islamic studies in Temple University. And he had produced many students, such as Salman Youssef. So this community goes way back with a relationship Islamically that was sound, based on figures who was renowned in the Islamic community at large outside America. So I think that our efforts in bridging the gap paid off, because by us being older brothers and coming through the Nation of Islam and basically really going through the same experience that we've seen our brothers go through that came back from abroad, we surmised basically that that was just an identity, you understand, problem more than it was a real problem. And we knew that that identity problem would eventually work itself out. and that they would realize that they are us, as we realized that they was us. And we knew that if we was going to survive, we had to survive in bringing ourselves back together. And so we knew, just like how we came to the Nation of Islam, we were sincere, we didn't have the right Aqidah, but because we were sincere, and our prophet, peace be upon him, said that religion is sincerity. Because everybody may not be knowledgeable. Everybody may not know the Arabic language. Everybody may not have the ability to teach. But Allah is just. Everybody can be sincere. And that's a goal that's attainable for everybody. So we knew that our brothers were sincere, because if they wasn't sincere, they wouldn't have left this country, went to a foreign land, a foreign culture, with teachers that was even foreign, because they was not of their own identity. So we knew all that was the real gist, and that gist eventually will work itself out, as it has. We're witnessing right now a group of young brothers who have come back and opened their arms to us, and our arms have always been open to them. And we have brought these brothers in to bridge the gap, to teach the knowledge, because we understood our own personal deficiencies. And those deficiencies were that we was not educated in the traditional sense, in the way that the religion was revealed to our prophet, peace be upon him. These brothers went abroad and they learned that language in that traditional sense. But when they came back, they did not have the experience that we had by putting the work in, so to speak. And when you put work in, you get educated. I mean, if you ain't a carpenter, but you're working with a carpenter, after a while, you become a carpenter yourself. So a lot of our Islam came about from putting the work in, because the blessings is in the work. No. So we think that now we are in a very promising position, because we feel comfortable now. Our greatest concern was that when the young brothers came back, and they said things that, we didn't really like, but we understood, as we thought we knew something, and we went out our parents' house, we came back and said things to our parents now. We thought we was grown, because we went out and we experienced some things. So we knew that these brothers had went out, and, they had gained the knowledge and everything. And when they came back, we was excited, because we said, okay, we got a future now. And we didn't expect them to come back and start teaching against us and scorning us and saying, that we wasn't on the path. But we understood that, and we always understood that we always had to have an amicable position. And it was based on that amicable position that we begin to bridge that gap. Like I said, from Ali Davis, Bay, Sheikh Shadi, we have had numerous of brothers coming here. We even had to take flack from our own community too, because our community had problems.
And that's very important that you mention that, because a lot of people, as earlier what the brother Imam said earlier, it's not easy to return the ship. Just because, okay, now this is the way we're going to go. No, it takes time, baby steps to remove that. And the fact that you just acknowledged that we took slack from our own people, and trying to bring about this transition and bridging this gap, is something tremendous. So I think
they do it?
Oh,
and then it goes back to something that Esau said, how do we now bring the academics to it? And so I think we need to follow this up with some seminars, some forums, where we can, again, recapitalize the history, because we're going to probably have to do this for a while. Recapitalize it, but see, are we willing to listen to what each other says, rather than listen to try to rebuke or respond?
Well, from the audience, I can tell you right now, the people are engaging, people are asking questions, and this is something that I think they will love to see. As myself, I definitely would love to see. So we're going to push for the open dialogue. And hopefully we can have the open dialogue, and we can sit down and start building more. The open dialogue is not to, you don't have to ask regurgitating questions, or where they leave off this, where they accept the kitab. So they're already telling you what they're doing. We are willing to accept, we are willing to move, but we also have something to learn from them. It ain't just that they have something to learn from us. We can both learn from each other and bridge those gaps.
And see, one method that we've used in the past has been successful because, again, Isa had asked the question, how do we bring the academics? Imam Shadi did a series of seminars here. And, you know, he did them in Ramadan as well as throughout the year. And there would literally be hundreds of people here. And many of those people had thought they would never step foot in here, or if they stepped foot in this building, the boogeyman would just jump out. But when they come in, because, you know, one of American statements said we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Right. And so sometimes we just are afraid of fear.
Exactly.
But when we face our fears, then we're able to overcome them.
We witnessed that. After we interviewed Shadeed Muhammad, it was like someone made a comment and said, who they going to interview next, the Shaitan? Well, the other been left.
And ask Shaitan what happened in Jannah.
And ask Shaitan what happened in Jannah. I mean, we're going to get that type of thing because people, normally what they do is they fight against something that's positive. And they know that it's right. So they just, you know, I call it withdrawal.
So we have an institution here, a campus. We got 17 classrooms. The capacity is 500. And all these brothers who have gotten knowledge, the building is available. So all we have to do is come in, and you know, we need classes like this. And actually, I wouldn't call them classes. It's almost like group therapy sessions. We need some group therapy, but then we also need some serious classes. Because see, sometimes going overseas gives you the wrong perspective. Many overseas think America is just such an ungodly place that there can be no Islam in America. And so anything in America that calls itself Islamic must be tainted. So now if we can build institutions here, we have enough brothers who have ijazah or really they just had the freedom to teach what they know, and we can continue to build our scholarship so that as Timbuktu at one time was such an obscure outpost, but during the Middle Ages, it was the center of learning for the Islamic world. And this was on the dark continent, as the West referred to it, but there was a center of Islamic knowledge and scholarship that I don't think has been surpassed in many of the Islamic countries. And so that possibility existed then. With the technology we have today, we can duplicate that easily here in America. And I think that's one way to bridge the gap, is to begin to build institutions. Because institutions give people a sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. When you see an institution, the Kaaba is an institution. Prayer itself is an institution. And no matter how big I think I am, when I'm praying with my brother, it really should humble me and make me see it's something bigger than me. And if we can pray together, if we can fast together, as the Prophet ﷺ said, then we are together. And so you know, things like that, and then we can extend that to if we can learn together. Because if we're learning the Quran, if we're learning the authentic sayings of the Prophet, then, you know, there's no distinction in one or the other. Because if I recite Al-Fatiha in China, and they don't speak English and I don't speak Chinese, but we can form a unity or a bridge. And so when we come together and we have a standard, then that should be the thing that gives us some unity, even if it's not uniform. We don't have to have the same uniform, but we do have to have the same unity. That's ikhlas. And if we have that, then Allah said He'll bring our hearts together, but only He can do it. We just have to have the intention, and then we have to go through the method, or we have to use all the means that we think can help, and then we trust Allah.
Just to add to that real quick.
If I may, I would like to say that, you know, one of the problems is that we have had knowledge, but we have not had the manifestation, the end results of the knowledge. And the end result of the knowledge is always the institution and the tangible physical progress that you can actually see. And so, you know, Islam demands that we have progress in our life. You understand? Because Islam is a way of life that constantly progresses. and in the process right now, talking about social reforms and dealing with the needs of the community, because basically that's what Islam does. It deals with the needs of the community. And when you fulfill the needs of people, then you have the attention of people. And so now we are embarking upon a major reconstruction program here at the Philadelphia Masjid. That's why as you went down the kitchen, you went into the gym, you know, you've seen various areas in the process of construction. One of our goals is to impact the youth. Right now we're focusing on an apprentice program where we can actually bring the youth in and let them become skilled in the trades that's really been monopolized by the unions and people who don't look like us. And you know, our goal is to make sure that to save a lot of our youth from the penitentiary, from drugs, and from not being able to establish family life, because family life is always the heart of the community. It's the foundation by which communities grow. Because when you look at the society at whole is just a conglomeration of families living together. So the problems that we see in our communities today is because of the dysfunction in the families, and that have grew enormously. So as Muslims, we have a responsibility to address the problems of the Muslims. And then not just the Muslims, the problems of humanity. Because if we don't address the problems of humanity, then once again, they become the problems of the community as Muslims, because we all live together. And I would like to say that we have numerous brothers that went abroad that did reach out to us. From Mokfi, from Ali Davis, the Shadi, the Brother Bay, and the list goes on. You know, but we understand that these same brothers that reach out to us, they have families, they have financial needs, they have to take care of themselves. And economically, we have not been in a position where we can actually really keep our own assets and resources. So what we witness, a lot of brothers coming from abroad, they in immigrant masjids and stuff, they up in the suburbs, you understand, teaching and things like that. And it's not that they didn't want to be with us. So we're trying to establish now an economic base so that we can actually keep our own assets, our own resources, and when the brothers do come back from abroad, we want to let them know that they have a responsibility first to their own communities and to their own people, and we're willing to embrace them in that effort.